Okay, hang on. What did the ocean say to the pirate captain? Nothing. Obviously, it's an ocean. It just waved. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Sounds Good Makes Sense, a discussion show for the World of Warcraft player and so on. My name is Devilor, and today, as expected, we're talking about Plunderstorm. As you're aware, last week, the newest round of Plunderstorm Season 2, or whatever you want to call it, Plunderstorm Round 2, Plunderstorm Season 2, Plunderstorm again, came out last week. And this is something that I was really excited for because I loved Plunderstorm the first time around. Yeah, there were some hitches and weirdnesses with it, and there were some things that I would like to see improved. But I was really looking forward to, A, hopefully seeing a lot of those improvements put into Plunderstorm for a second round, and B, just getting to play it again because I just generally find it to be fun. And while that's still the case, and I'm still enjoying Plunderstorm, I'm still having fun when I jump into Plunderstorm, and it's still, I think, a good and exciting game mode, I'm definitely feeling a little bit less excited about it this time around, feeling less connected to it. I'm not getting that feeling of like, ooh, I want to sit down and play more Plunderstorm nearly as much as I did with the first round. So I just wanted to take some time and explore that a little bit. So to start this discussion off, let's go over some of the changes that they made for this season, some of the good changes, some of the changes I'm less of a big fan of, and just generally talk about how everything worked out, what sort of effects the changes have had on the gameplay, and sort of examine things from there. We'll start with one of the very good changes I think that they made, which was the transition from a renown track sort of approach to all the rewards into having, they call it the Plunderstore. It's having just an in-game shop essentially that you earn plunder, and then you can purchase items from that shop in whatever order you choose. As long as you have enough plunder for an item, you can buy it, and then you have that unlocked. And overall, this is an excellent change that I'm very glad they made. In fact, I think I even argued for this in some capacity when Plunderstorm first came out around a year ago when we were talking about it back then. It's a very good change. It doesn't take anything away from the experience of earning rewards. It just gives you a little bit more agency over what you're unlocking first, and by extension, allows you to decide if a reward is something that you really want to bother trying to grind out, or if you're reaching a point where you're like, okay, I'm kind of done now. I'm kind of over it. I don't need to unlock anything more, so I'm just going to call it quits there. It gives you that option to choose which things you're unlocking when, so that way, at the very least, you can make sure that the stuff you're most excited about is the stuff that you're unlocking first. It's just a great example of how allowing a player to prioritize their time and prioritize what rewards they feel are the most valid can create a better and more enjoyable gaming experience for everyone who's brushing up against a certain type of content, especially for something like World of Warcraft, where there's like 8 million different things you could be doing with your time. This allows you to then prioritize how much time you want to spend in Plunderstorm. Let you pick and choose what sort of rewards you want to get. And then once you're done with getting those rewards, you can either decide if you want to continue earning more rewards in Plunderstorm or if you're just kind of done with it. That's a good change. And that's something that I think, honestly, is the sort of thing that we should start seeing more of throughout the rest of World of Warcraft, is the ability to decide, yes, this is the reward that I want. I don't care about, like, it sucks that it's the last possible thing that I get. Let me choose what things that I can get in whichever order and so on. I think that's just generally, I don't know what the word I'm looking for here is, polite in terms of respecting players' time. And for something like Plunderstorm, I think it was a great change. I will say that the UI for the Plunderstore is kind of terrible. And I assume that's just because they basically had to like reuse UI assets from the in-game shop, because that's kind of what it looks like, is the regular in-game shop. I assume that they didn't have the ability, for whatever reason, they didn't have the approvals or something to get a custom shop made for Plunderstorm. That's just game development stuff. That sort of thing happens all the time. So I assume that's why it's the way that it is. But it's definitely the case where, like, especially as you have gone through and you've unlocked most things, which if you played and you finished the renown track in the previous round of Plunderstorm, most of the stuff in there is already unlocked. We're going to come back to that. It makes it very difficult to actually even find which things you haven't bought yet, to be sure that you still are spending your plunder on things that you can unlock. If you're someone who's enjoying the game and you're getting all this plunder, you want to be able to spend that on stuff. And sometimes it's hard to find which stuff it is that you still have available to even spend on. So the UI could definitely use quite a bit of refinement when it comes to the Plunderstore, but I'm still very glad that they went to the length of implementing it in the first place so that Players who only want to spend a little bit of time in Plunderstorm so that they can get the rewards that they want to get and then get out of there, have that option available to them. Another good change was the addition of the quote unquote practice mode. This isn't as like huge of a change overall, but essentially it allows you to go into just a lobby that is just like the lobby at the start of a game, but a game never starts. You can just hang out in the lobby area and mess around with different skills and stuff, learn different things about what's going on. They added a couple of little vendors in there that you can actually go and buy individual skills so that you can be like, okay, how does this thing actually work? And you can go and you grab it and you can start to experiment with it a little bit and understand a little bit better. Like, okay, here is how to use slicing winds. Here is how to use the arcane orb or whatever. Like you have different ways to actually go in and test this stuff out. That's a good thing. That allows players to get a little bit more of an understanding of what they're even friggin' doing before they get dropped into the game. That's a good thing. More ways for you to familiarize, and like it even lets you just go in and change your keybinds and stuff ahead of time. That's good change. Good change. In the more mixed category of good and bad, it's kind of where I'd put the new abilities that were added. There's a total of 4 new abilities, 2 damage abilities and 2 utility abilities that were added to the game. And we'll start with the damage abilities because my thoughts on the Aura of Zealotry and the Celestial Barrage is pretty much the same. They're both kind of they're interesting. They have like their own unique niche. They have some interesting stuff that's going on with them. They're contributing to the overall diversity of abilities that are available. But they're also both kind of just way too good to the extent that they kind of overshadow a lot of the other abilities that already exist. Aura of Zealotry, just has a lot going on for it. Basically, you put a big old field, like a big old consecrate down on the ground. While you're standing in that consecrate, not only is that doing damage to enemy players, but it also makes you move faster. Also, while you're inside of that consecrate, your regular attack gets turned into this like big frontal cleave attack, which does a lot of damage. It does quite a lot of damage, especially if they're also standing in the consecrate at the time. It does a lot of damage. It's a wide area. It's very large. It's usually not very difficult to at least get people to still try and fight you. Like it's pretty rare that you drop the thing and someone runs away and starts pelting you from a distance unless they happen to be running a fully ranged build. So what more often than not ends up happening is they'll get just outside the radius, but that's fine because you're still close enough and you're still inside the consecrate to where you're able to use that souped up melee attack. And it's a really, really strong melee attack. It's the Aura of Zealotry is one of those, like, if you're going for a melee build, you want this and you want it maxed out pretty much regardless of anything else that you're doing. And that's sort of the point where, to me, it feels like it's just a little bit too strong and it's kind of just doing a little bit too much. And Celestial Barrage ends up being sort of similar in a sense where, just the damage that it does is really, really high. I believe it's the highest damage at this point of any of the ranged abilities. But it also has just absurd range to it, like halfway across the map level. Well, not quite that. I'm exaggerating, but it's super far. The distance that it can go, even at a low charge, is incredibly far. And at a full charge, there's basically like it will go all the way across the final couple of circles in Plunderstorm. That's how long of a distance it actually is. On top of that, you can also kind of use it as an escape because it sort of sends you upward and backward into the air. And it has a pretty wide radius on its beam, wide enough that it kind of, I believe it ends up being the same width as the fully charged mana orb. So it's just kind of better than all of the other ranged abilities in kind of every single possible way, which again is kind of like, it's cool. And the kit behind it is interesting. I just feel like one of those things, like when it's better than everything else in literally every way, it's kind of a problem. And both of these abilities to me kind of suffer from a little bit of just, they just have too much to them in comparison to other abilities. Like the Searing Axe, for example. Yep, you push Searing Axe, a big frontal cleave happens, and that's it. Even some of the more complicated abilities like the Slicing Wind or the Mana Orb. These are abilities that, they have a channel and that does more of something the more you channel, but the something that it does more of is basically the only thing that it does. The way that these two abilities work, there's kind of like 4 things that are happening with each of them, which just makes them a bit too, there's just too much that's added to your repertoire by having these abilities, essentially, is what it boils down to. They're just too good. That said, this is literally just tuning is all that needs to happen here. I feel like the Aura of Zealotry, they could probably dump the movement speed increase that you get while you're inside of the Like, it just doesn't seem necessary that it also makes you move faster while you're inside of the consecrate area, and probably drop off the damage from your melee attacks a little bit so that it's still worthwhile to use other abilities. Because that's also kind of part of the problem with the Aura of Zealotry is I would love to do something like Aura of Zealotry and the Toxic Smackerel, for example, but there's no reason for me to use Toxic Smackerel when I could just be spamming my regular melee attack while I'm inside the Aura of Zealotry, because that's just how much damage it does. So I'd like to see a little bit of just numbers generally adjustment there. And then the same with the Celestial Barrage. I feel like the width of it could definitely come down a little bit. And also the damage on Celestial Barrage just needs to come down a bit. It's just a bit too much damage. As for the two utility spells, there is Call Gale Feather and Void Tear. And Gale Feather is kind of weird. It's basically like a little windy hurricane thing that they've tried to give it the theme of like you're calling a bird in that's going to do this thing, but you kind of don't see the bird really. At least I've never noticed the bird that's in there. Maybe if you look really closely, but I'm not looking that closely at this when I'm in the middle of a match. So it's already kind of weird that they call it Call Gale Feather when they could have just called it Wind or something. I don't know. But that's kind of pedantic. We're not going to worry about that too much. To me, what's weird about Gale Feather is that it's like the only targeted reticle ability inside Plunderstorm, whereas everything else is kind of built in a way where you could be holding down your right mouse button for the entire game. You could just literally be treating this like it's an over-the-shoulder, like third-person action sort of thing. But this thing, for whatever reason, they decided to make it a targeted reticle ability. It's just kind of weird. It doesn't really seem to fit in with the way all of the other abilities have worked in Plunderstorm thus far. I think there might be one or two of the like items you can use that maybe get placed down somewhere, but for the most part, every time you have an ability, even if it's something that you can kind of target in an area a little bit, like the Star Bomb just sort of goes off of where's your camera facing at the time that you use it. Gale Feather, I get with the way that it works, why they would want it to be a reticle targeted ability. It just ends up feeling kind of out of place as a result. Also, it's really tough to use effectively. I have seen people, in fact, I've died to it before when somebody managed to block me off where there was like a hill and I couldn't walk up this hill, but I also couldn't get past the Gale Feather, and I could not get past it while the circle was coming in. I ended up dying in the storm because I spent too long trying to go up this hill, which I kind of felt like I should have been able to go up, but whatever. Geometry in World of Warcraft is weird sometimes. But I have seen it used fairly effectively. It's just a little bit awkward. The other utility ability, Void Tear, this one is, I've had a hard time finding a reason to ever actually want this thing compared to other easily available options. And the reason is basically the way that it works is you use it once, and then you have a short period of time where if you use it again, you will teleport back to where you were when you used it the first time and do a little AoE explosion when you're there. Now, the reason that this is tough to use is that, in my experience at least, in Plunderstorm, it's pretty uncommon that you actually want to go to some place where you just were. Like, it requires some pretty hefty amounts of luck to be in the middle of fighting somebody, put this thing down, and somehow they end up back in that spot again by the time that you want to use it again. So the usage for the damage is pretty unlikely. As far as an escape goes, you can use it to get away from people. Like, there are effective ways to use this to get away from people who are using movement abilities to try and chase you down. But you do have to get them to use those movement abilities in the first place. And in most cases, that kind of means that you need to have a movement ability of your own, which means that this is now not your movement ability. This is a secondary, like almost defensive ability to be used. And there are other abilities that fit that role quite a lot better. The Repel and the Lightning Bulwark in particular are both much better at being general purpose defensive abilities than Void Tear is. So to me, it's one that it seems interesting, but I've always had a hard time finding a way for it to actually be useful inside of an overall build. And it just doesn't seem to mesh very well with anything else. A lot of what's interesting about the way that Plunderstorm works for me is finding ways to be like, okay, I've got the Hunter's Chains. That'll go really well with my, what's the name of the ability? The Windstorm ability, the one that slows everybody around you. I always get Windstorm and Hurricane mixed up, or maybe that, two different names of abilities that are confusing to me. Either way, the Ice Storm AoE that you activate it and it slows everything that's around you. So you go, okay, cool. I can Hunter's Chains, and then I can use this Ice Storm ability, and that'll slow everybody that's next to me so that they can lock them down, and then use something like Star Bomb or Earthbreaker to finish them off, or even just center up my melee abilities on them. And especially if you're doing that in like duos with somebody else, it gives you the ability to set up some neat combos as a result. I have a very hard time finding a way to make the Void Tear ever useful in a combo. Like it doesn't really seem to fit with anything else. So that's kind of my issue with Void Tear. This next change, I have a probably somewhat controversial and maybe unpopular opinion on, but they added the ability for you to choose where you're going to drop. And I don't really like that. Let me explain. A big part of what I find appealing about Battle Royale gameplay is every time you do a new round, you're going to be faced with different circumstances. You're going to have different things that are occurring. And every time you're going through a Battle Royale, you have to figure out how to sort of take what cards you're dealt, take what options you're given, and find a way to make the best out of it. You're looking at, okay, what abilities do I find? You're looking at what fights do I get into? What other people are around, and so on. In trying to figure out how to make the best out of your situation by essentially being dealt with a whole bunch of random stuff that you have no direct control over, and trying to find a way to make order out of the chaos in such a way that puts you on top. And for me, that sort of moment at the start of a round where you're like, okay, we're over here. Let's figure out real quick what the best place for us to go to is. I think I see some stuff over there. Okay, let's dive on that, and we'll go to this spot. Or that moment of like, ooh, okay, I'm not close enough to get to where I would like to be, but I can drop on this spot over here and then work my way over to where I want to be. That to me is those sort of split second decisions that you need to make at the start of the match are a big part of that feel of dealing with the circumstances and dealing with essentially the randomness that the game is throwing at you. I genuinely like that, and I appreciate and enjoy that about Battle Royale gameplay and about Plunderstorm. Now, obviously, you don't have to pick a drop point, and that's what I ended up doing before too long anyway, just because I felt dumb going to the same spot over and over and over again. You do have the option to just say, pick a random one, and then it will tell you what that random one is, which, again, I would still kind of like to not know until I'm in the match, but whatever. It will tell you what that random one is, and it locks you in on that spot. You can't click the random thing and then change it to a different one. So there is the option still to just have a random drop point, which does make that a bit better for me. It does reduce some of that, and it still allows me, at least from my own gameplay experience, to get that feeling of, okay, I'm dropping at this spot, so let me figure out where I want to go from here. Let me plan out a little route in my head as I'm falling down towards this spawn point, and figure out what things I'm going to run towards, what elites I'm going to try to get, what chests I'm going to run towards, etc. I still get a little bit of that figuring it out as I go in the process. It just, part of it is not everyone being in that same boat it just feels like I'm self-inflicted. There's that feeling of I'm intentionally making this harder on myself that is kind of, it's kind of whatever. And also it means there's less variance from game to game, because you know that all of the good, like the best drop spots are going to be full of people, because somebody out of the 60 people in this round, or 30 teams if you're playing in duos, somebody went to those spots. So you're never going to be like, ooh, what an exciting turn of events, what a sudden random turn of events where I went down to Stromgard and nobody had actually gotten all of these. It's very, very rare for that to have actually occurred. Whereas in the first round, it was still worth like going to those spots and taking a peek at them at the very least. It's basically never worth going to Stromgard if you didn't drop there, now that this thing is in the place. So it's kind of ended up having that feeling of making the map a little bit smaller, feeling a little bit smaller to me. There are a couple of changes to mob spawns and mob positionings that I noticed throughout the map, which, again, some of it I think is good. Some of it I'm kind of iffy on. One is just that they've put just generally more, there's mob packs around in more places. So there's fewer sections of the map that are just straight up empty, which I think is good. It always sucked being like, especially like in the south side of the map, you would be like, okay, at some point I need to push my way north, and there is nothing between here and all the way up where everyone else is at this point. So this is a big empty open space where there's nothing for me to be fighting. And one of the most important things that you need to do in Plunderstorm is always be fighting something. You basically need to constantly be in combat in some way or another, and constantly getting kills. Otherwise, you fall behind on XP. So that, as a result, previously made it so that there were certain drop areas that is just like, okay, if you end up here, you're immediately at a major disadvantage, not because you're not going to get good drops here, but because you're going to clear out this area and then there is nothing for you to kill while you're running halfway across the map to get to the next area where maybe there will be something to kill or maybe it'll already be cleared out. So that part of it, I think, is good, where they've added in more mob spawns in these particular areas. But they've made one other change that I'm also kind of iffy on, which is mobs now respawn. You can effectively, and in certain areas, they seem to respawn relatively quickly, which means that it's actually possible for you to just kind of sit in one spot. And if you've got a big enough area and a big enough circle to go around, like especially I've noticed this around the trolls that are kind of central to the map, they're sort of to the south and west of the farm area, or maybe they're just straight west of the farm area. I'm not remembering the map directly off the top of my head. But there's like this new troll spawn area that's been added near one of the central hills inside of Arathi Highlands. And those guys respawn super fast. Like you can probably just sit in that spot and like go and kill a couple other things from time to time and then go back to that hill and there will be trolls back there again. And you're able to just keep killing things in the same general area. And while I can kind of, from one perspective, see it like, it's kind of nice that you now don't have to worry as much about, okay, I'm going to run all the way across the map over here. And now this place is empty and now I'm screwed because there's nothing here for me to fight. I definitely see that angle of it. I just think in some of these areas where they respawn so quickly, it's problematic because it allows you to kind of never leave this spot and you're just continually farming in the same area over and over and over again, which is kind of like, they need to have a reason to push people around the map a little bit more than that. So that's another one that I'm a little bit just generally iffy on. I don't have super strong opinions either way, just something that I noticed. Another change that most people have noticed at this point is that there's no trios queue. It's just solos and duos that they've come out of the gate with. Now it's possible that their plan is to, as they did last time, eventually add trios back in. It just feels weird if like it feels weird for it to not be there right now. B, would feel weird. Like, I don't know why. I don't know what the point of doing that would be. Like, oh, we'll add trios in another 6, weeks into the thing, or 4 weeks or 2 weeks or however long into the thing. We will add trios in later on throughout the season. Like, why not just let that be there from the beginning? If that's even their plan. It's possible that their plan is just don't have trios, which I don't know why they would make that the case, other than potentially trying to make sure that there's more people in the solos and duos queues. I'm not entirely sure. I play Plunderstorm almost exclusively as a solo player. I just find the gameplay more fun that way. So for me, not having trios is kind of fine. I just don't like the big wombo combos that you get stuck with in group gameplay where it's like, okay, we're going to come across somebody and one of them's going to Hunter's chains me into a big AoE stun that another guy's already winding up, followed by a star bomb, followed by an earthbreaker, and I'm just dead, like with nothing to have done about that. I don't enjoy that sort of stuff. So for me, the gameplay is genuinely more fun as a solo player. I'll still play with people, and I've done a bunch of duos even this time around with people that I just like, just my friends, and I'd like to play with them. I'll still do duos, but I find the solos more fun. So for me, ultimately, the trios not existing kind of doesn't matter because I don't really have any interest in doing trios anyway. It just is surprising to me that it's not there and that they haven't really said anything about it. Last on the list of new stuff that I want to talk about is the new rewards themselves. They've added a bunch of, well, a handful, we'll say, of new things into the Plunderstore that you can then purchase. So there are things for you to unlock if you have already done all of the unlocks previously. They're almost entirely recolors. In fact, I'm pretty sure I don't think there are any unique models from any of these things. The colors are different, yes, but the models themselves, the geometry of all of these items, I don't think is unique, with the possible exception of the ore. But it's possible that there's just some ore item somewhere that I'm not thinking of that you could already get otherwise. I don't know. I'm not that deep into transmog to know every single model that's available, but I'm pretty sure most of the like transmog models were things that were already available. All of the pets and mounts and stuff, there's already a version of that pet or mount that's available through some other capacity, possibly even through previous Plunderstorm, but it's just a recolor of a pre-existing pet or mount that was already available through some other means. So they're all kind of recolors, and that's a bit meh. And what makes that kind of worse is that on top of all of the new rewards being recolors, there also just aren't that many of them. There's like one new armor set. There's a couple of hats, which are like, at first I was like, oh, dang, that's cool. They did at least add a new hat, but then I realized it was just a rogue tier set from a while back. So there's that. And like I said, there's a couple of items. There's like the ore and the shovel, and the ore and the shovel are kind of the only like really unique-ish new things. And even then, there's been shovels in the game for ages that you can transmog into, and I'm pretty sure there's been an ore, but I'm not actually completely positive on that. But most of that stuff is it's stuff that's already existed in some capacity, and there just aren't that many items. There's like 20, 24 new items, something like that, compared to the like 40 something that were unlockable previously. They also, and a lot of people noticed this and were kind of upset about it. They decided not to add a new Trader's Tender unlock. So if you got Tender during Plunderstorm in the first season, you don't get any more Tender this time around, which is kind of meh. If they didn't want people to be able to get both sets of Tender, it would at least been nice to be like, okay, there's at least a new, like the previous one, you can't go back and get the previous one, but you can get a new one again. That would have been nice. I don't know. There's not very many. It didn't feel like there were very many new rewards, or it felt like the new rewards were too cheap, or maybe both. And the reason I'm saying all of that, the point that I'm generally meandering towards, and the fact that I need to express to explain this viewpoint, is that I had everything new unlocked in about 6 hours after Plunderstorm went live. It took me literally like 6 hours of gameplay, which was something like, I don't know, 10, 15 matches, somewhere like that. Not maybe a few more than that. Let's say 20 matches probably in total. And I had everything unlocked from the new Plunderstorm season. And well, yes, I can still play the game. Like it's not gone now. I can still go in and play Plunderstorm. It still kind of sucked to be like, I like playing Plunderstorm, and part of what I enjoy is getting rewards. I enjoy that feeling of getting rewarded for my playtime and getting something for doing well in a round, or lasting longer in a round, or farming enough plunder in a round, and so on. I enjoyed that aspect of the gameplay as much as I enjoy the actual like combat and battle royale experience of the gameplay. And that half of it is now gone for me. That portion of the gameplay no longer exists, and was gone very, very quickly. Now, I assume this was largely in response to feedback that they got in the first round, where, first off, people were very rightly, at least at first, very rightly saying that it was taking too long to get the rewards. When Plunderstorm first came out, they definitely undershot quite dramatically on how long it was going to take people to get stuff, and that felt bad. That felt like this was too long of a grind. Where they ended up towards the end of the first Plunderstorm season, things were, in my opinion, too fast at that point. It took almost no time at all to get all the way through the renown track. And since then, not only now do we have the Plunderstore where you can pick and choose what you're getting. So like you might not even want, like maybe you only want the mount. Congratulations. You are probably done in like 2 or 3 rounds of Plunderstorm. And now there's nothing else for you to want to get at this point. So for that person who doesn't want to play a ton of Plunderstorm to get these rewards, it feels like overkill. Like it feels like it's just way too fast anyway. Like again, 6 hours after starting the event, after the event went live, within 6 hours, I had everything. This was all done on stream. Like there's evidence. It took me about 6 hours of gameplay. There was a point in that where I took a break to like cook dinner or something, but I came back and then I got the rest of it. It was a total of about 6 hours of gameplay. I had all the rewards. That feels a bit meh for something that's supposed to, like, this is an event that runs for like, what is it, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that. It runs for a while. It felt kind of lame that I was done with it on the first day, at least in terms of getting rewards out of it. As to how they could have resolved this issue or done it better, I think 2 things. One, I think the rate of earning plunder is just too high. And it's going too quickly to get through stuff, at least compared to the cost of the rewards. So either they could have made the rewards cost more or had less plunder dropping in the middle of matches. Either way, it's effectively the same result of it takes longer to get each individual reward. And 2, I'm surprised that there was so little in the way of new rewards. Like genuinely surprised that there was so little that I could unlock this time around, especially given that it's all basically recolors. Like they probably could have done another 2 or 3 sets of recolors, and there would have at least been more things to unlock, more boxes to tick off that say like, hey, congratulations, you've earned the the brown version of the same Plunderstorm coat. You've now earned the red version of the same. Actually, the red version was the original one. You've now earned the green version of the same Plunderstorm coat. Like, maybe they're saving that for future seasons, but if this is the level of stuff we can expect to be added with each Plunderstorm season, I'm a little bit worried because it's just not, it's not really inspiring. It's very underwhelming. And I think that's the word that kind of summarizes my experience with Plunderstorm Round 2 is I'm just feeling very underwhelmed. There's only 4 new abilities. Two of them kind of suck. And 2 of them are broken and overpowered. So there's basically 2 new abilities that have redefined every build because you want one of these abilities pretty much no matter what you're going for. And if, well, you maybe not. There's probably people that don't like them still, and that's fine. But they seem very, very strong to me. And that's certainly the case that if I have the option to level one of them, I will always do that compared to other things. And I would have liked to have seen like twice as many new abilities, like bring in even more new abilities, maybe phase out some of the old ones in the process. But I would like to have seen more new abilities. I would have liked to have seen more new rewards. I would have liked to have seen things get shifted around on the map a little bit more. Like it was a little bit disappointing to me that the exact same routes I used to take in the previous round of Plunderstorm were still viable. Like I could literally go in, like the first game that I got, I was like, oh, I'm going to drop on Stromguard because apparently I can pick that now. So I'm going to drop on Stromguard, and I just did the exact same route that I was doing whenever I had the ability to drop on Stromguard in the previous round of Plunderstorm, and it worked exactly the same. Like move some of the elites around, make them be in different spots, move some of the chests around. Just, I don't know. It kind of feels like it's made this round of Plunderstorm feel less like, yeah, it's a new season of Plunderstorm, and more like it's a second crack at the first season for people that didn't get anything before. Because I'm sure like if you didn't play Plunderstorm in the previous season, there's tons of stuff for you to earn. There's a lot for you to do. There's a lot of gameplay there and a lot of rewards to earn if you didn't play Plunderstorm before. But for those of us who like Plunderstorm, for those of us who were excited to play Plunderstorm the first time, it ends up feeling a little bit flat. And that's kind of bad, I think, at the end of the day. Like it's good to try and expand things so that people who didn't like your gameplay mode the previous time, maybe you can change things up in a way that they like it a little bit more. But you still got to make sure that the people who liked it the first time still like it. And that's kind of, again, I don't dislike it. I'm not like saying that it's not fun. I definitely had fun for the time that I was playing Plunderstorm. But I'm not finding myself wanting to play it more at this point because I feel like it feels like something that I've done a ton of already at this point, and I'm just kind of done with it. And that is disappointing to me because I was really excited to play more Plunderstorm. In hindsight, maybe this is why Blizzard wasn't really hyping this up too much. Like Plunderstorm Round 2 was mentioned in like the roadmap, and it was mentioned in the, like, when they were talking about stuff that was coming in 2025, they mentioned, oh yeah, and we're going to have another round of Plunderstorm, and you'll learn more about that later. And then there kind of wasn't much more to learn about that later until it came out. Like they kind of really just didn't talk about Plunderstorm. I had a hard time finding out for certain that last week was actually when it was launching. I remembered seeing the date somewhere at some point. I was like, wasn't Plunderstorm coming out this week? I feel like I'm not seeing anything about Plunderstorm because I had been expecting to like go on the Warcraft Twitter or go on to the forums or the news articles and be like, and here's Plunderstorm coming soon, and like just seeing the normal suite of announcements for a new thing that's coming out, and there kind of wasn't really any of that. So in hindsight, maybe the reason there kind of wasn't much in terms of announcement or hype being built for Plunderstorm was because Blizzard realized there wasn't much to hype up with this season, which again is disappointing. I really, really like the game mode, and I want to see them do exciting and big things with the game mode. And I know that they've lost a bunch of the developers that originally worked on Plunderstorm last time around. So that's probably a factor to it as well, is that there's just less people who are super excited to be working on it. I don't know. It's ended up feeling pretty underwhelming to me. And that makes me kind of hesitant towards the future of Plunderstorm. I would love to see them come away from this and be like, yep, we didn't do enough with Plunderstorm this time. So next time we'll have maybe a new map. Would be nice. Maybe at least at the very least a suite of new abilities, a bunch of new rewards, more like stuff moved around the map if it's not a whole new map and stuff like that. But I don't know. They've kind of now shown that this is now the standard for what a new round of Plunderstorm is, and that makes me skeptical toward the future of Plunderstorm. I'll put it that way. But who knows? Maybe next go around they'll decide to do something big with it. Or here's an option: maybe some indie developer out there or some other developer out there will see the essence of what Blizzard could have done with Plunderstorm and decide to build out a battle royale that fulfills the fantasy of what Plunderstorm is inside a more self-contained package. Because personally, to me, I like Plunderstorm enough that I would like to see it become a standalone video game. I think it's held back by the fact that it's built inside of the World of Warcraft engine, and I would like to see it become its own thing. That's unlikely to occur. At least at Blizzard, it's very unlikely to occur. It's more likely that they'll just continue having it be this like event-based thing that happens sometimes inside World of Warcraft. Or, maybe they'll look at feedback like what I'm giving right now and say, okay, the people who love Plunderstorm felt disappointed by this. The people who didn't love Plunderstorm still didn't love Plunderstorm. Why the heck are we bothering? Like maybe that'll be their takeaway from this whole thing. Who knows? I hope it's not, but I wouldn't be like shocked if it was. At least with how things are going currently. And it's worth noting as well, like a lot of this, we had literally the first night playing Plunderstorm, it was already the case that people were stopping. Like I was having a hard time getting queues by the end of the first night. There was a game that I sat in the lobby for 5 to 10 minutes. And I was even like, okay, well, sorry. I was streaming at the time. Sorry, chat. I guess we're not getting another round in. And then it just went, but it went with like 15 out of 60 players in this lobby. It's possible something broke, but the lobbies had been trending that direction for a little while. We'd been getting smaller and smaller crews dropping in. So if interest in Plunderstorm has already dropped off that dramatically after like the first couple of days, I haven't actually played it in a few days at this point. So I don't know if it's gotten better or worse from then, but I would be surprised if queues have gotten better and faster since then. I would not be surprised in the slightest if most people have already now finished everything that they were going to get out of Plunderstorm and went, okay, I'm done with that track of rewards. So now I'm done with this gameplay mode. And that to me is sad. Again, as someone who really likes Plunderstorm and sees the potential for what it could be, it disappoints me to see it be so underwhelming in this season. Anyway, that's about all of my thoughts on that particular subject. Again, something I really enjoy, just a bit underwhelmed and a bit disappointed with how it worked out in this season. We're going to move on to answer some questions. And also, I wanted to bring up a couple of comments that were made on last week's episode about add-on functionality and how Blizzard could potentially claw back some of the aspects of things that add-ons are now doing that are trivializing certain parts of encounters, especially in high-end rating, and just talking about that topic a whole bunch. A bunch of people brought up and explained a little bit more about how private auras are working nowadays. This was something that I kind of knew was something that Blizzard had access to. I think in my mindless rambling when I was recording that episode, I slightly forgot to mention that I knew it was something that already existed. And I ended up like proposing an idea that was an idea that already existed. It was weird that my brain was doing some things last week, and I don't know entirely what all of them were. So there was some weird ways that I went about that. Either way, the result was some great comments from some people that I want to sort of bring up and highlight and address that were talking about private auras and talking about how that relates to game design. I'm going to go through two comments from two different commenters, and I've sort of abridged these a little bit because they were part of larger like blocks of discussion. So WowHex said, the issue with private auras is that it doesn't even stop us from using weak auras to track debuffs. Instead of having an aura auto track who has what debuffs, we just use a macro to signal to the weak aura that we do have the debuff. Then it auto assigns positions just like it was doing before. We've done this on Smolderon and Firak. I don't actually know how to say. I don't know how to say that guy's name. I've had debates with people on how to say that name before, and I didn't even do the encounter. Anyway, sidetracked. And this is a very good point, and one that I had assumed there was some way that people were getting around the private auras thing anyway. I hadn't realized it was so simple as just having a macro that you just say, okay, push the macro when you have the debuff, and now it does the thing anyway, which just then sends you right back into the problem of the thinking is all done for me. The only annoyance is struggling with the UI and finding that you have the debuff in the list of debuffs in the upper right of the screen. So that's good to know. That's some good extra insight, and also explains a little bit more why it's so difficult for these sorts of add-ons to be disabled, because what you just disable macros from existing. Do you remove the ability for macros to send a whisper to your raid leader? Because that's what you would have to do to break that particular functionality. And that's kind of, that would be rough. That would be rough. Another comment that I wanted to point out, that's a better suggestion for how to resolve this, was from Lenori, who said, the solution is to make the mechanic in a way where you don't have to see the buff or debuff icon, which is what they should do anyway, thus completely removing the need for a private aura, which they keep using. So this, and there were a couple other commenters that said similar things along this, is kind of the crux of where I think Blizzard should be looking to kind of attack this from a game design perspective as well. Obviously, the episode last week was mostly focused on like what can they do from an API perspective, from an add-on perspective, to be able to claw things back. So we didn't really get into the design of things too much, but I probably should have, because this is a very good point. If these things were designed, if these mechanics were designed in such a way where you just didn't need the weak aura in the first place, it was designed, like someone else had a suggestion of they could have just made them have different colors or something, so that way there was that natural feeling of, oh, I got the purple one, you got the purple one, we all both run to the purple icon. I got the yellow one, you got the yellow one, we both run to the yellow icon. That sort of thing would have been an option. Or I would like to see part of what I was mentioning in terms of I can never remember the name of the like built-in weak aura pop-up sort of things, the built-in power aura things, the stuff that pops up on your screen by default inside of the game. It would be great if some of those things could be used for more things that are actual raid mechanics. Similar to how like nowadays in PvP, if you get silenced, there's a little icon that pops up that says you're silenced for a second. If you get stunned, there's a little icon that pops up that says you're stunned, and it has like a little bar and everything on it. And that is something that there's elements of that are built into the game, so you know immediately that this is the crowd control effect, or this is the debuff that is now attached to you. Why not do something similar for things like you have the bomb, run out of the raid, or you have the egg aura, run to the egg? They could easily do more stuff like that, so that way there isn't a need for these weak auras and so on. Now, you might make the counter argument. Maybe the point is that they don't want you. They want you to be able to figure this stuff out through the rest of the debuffs. They want you to have to discuss this stuff. So maybe going to the lengths of having color coded debuffs that then you're meant to kind of just mark down which different spot is, and you just use that color coding to do all the thinking for you as well. Maybe that's a step too far, and maybe it is. Maybe that's not the intent for the design of the encounter. Maybe that's just not what they were wanting to do in this particular case. It's possible, but I do think I mentioned this in last week's episode too. I do think that mess of debuffs up in the top right of your screen, the mess of buffs and debuffs that's up there, that's just a horrible way to present information to the player with the amount of buffs and debuffs that are regularly on people. Having something that's a bit more of a, hey, you've got the mechanic and you have to deal with it, even if they didn't color code it, but at least had it like, okay, you know instantly that you have this debuff, so then you can figure out with the rest of your group what you're going to do or something. I don't know. There's ways to make this less of a pain in the ass and less of something where players feel like they need something like a weak aura to even just describe to them the information that they need to then make those intelligent choices. And that to me is kind of the crux of the issue, and kind of a little bit of what Lenori was referring to here in their comment as well. The idea of just make it so it's more, make it so you don't need a weak aura to know that you have the debuff. Make it so that you know that you have a mechanic that you have to deal with in a very visible way, so that you don't have to rely as much on external things to parse the thousands of bits of information that are flowing across your screen at any moment in time. That I certainly agree with, and I think encounter design is a major factor in how to approach and resolve some of these issues that we're seeing with add-ons these days. At least these issues that Blizzard is pointing towards with these add-ons. Anyway, we also had a question from Dead and Cold that I wanted to get to. Dead and Cold said, Marksman Hunters are getting a pretty fundamental rework for 11.1. What is your opinion on Blizz changing a spec or class's core functionality mid-expansion like this? In the past, they always waited for the launch of a new expansion for this level of rework, but lately they've been more willing to do it for a season change in a major patch. Is it good they're willing to fix a spec in a timely manner, even if it means a big change, or is it better to leave the big changes for new expansions when players have more time to adjust to them? So I want to start responding to this question just by saying that I'm not super familiar with Marksman Hunter in the War Within. I'm generally aware of Hunter. I've played Hunter a bunch in the past in prior expansions, but I haven't really played it in the War Within. So I don't have a great direct sense of the scale of what this change is or how fundamental it actually is. So I'm going to speak in more broad terms about when it's appropriate to make those changes mid-expansion versus when it's appropriate to wait until a new expansion in order to do that. I'm just going to have to speak in broader terms because I don't know the extent to which Marksman Hunter is getting changed in 11.1. I do think it's fine and good in some cases for them to do like mini reworks in the middle of an expansion. And there's multiple different angles to this. One, we're still pretty early in the War Within. Like 11.1 is the first major content patch. It's not like you've been playing your War Within Marksman Hunter for a year at this point, and now the rug's being pulled out from under you, but you're still doing the same content. That's not the case of what's happening. It hasn't been that long. It's been one tier basically. So it hasn't been that long. So it's an okay time to still make some changes that perhaps they wanted to make for 11.0, but didn't get to in time. That I could see as being reasonable. It also does depend entirely on the scale of how in-depth this rework is. And the reason that I keep saying that is because a lot of people have a different sense of what is too big of a rework versus too small of a rework. I've seen people who have referred to like back when Cataclysm hit, and not only did everyone have their talent trees completely redone, but also I remember having discussions with Paladins at the time about the addition of Holy Power to the class. There were people saying that was not even that big of a change. Not even that big, wasn't really a change at all. There were people who held the opinion that Holy Power was just kind of whatever, you're still kind of doing the same thing. Not a ton of people were saying that, obviously, but I did see people making that argument back then. Obviously, there were still a lot of people who were like, this change is huge. And even to the extent of some people saying this change should never be made because this has now fundamentally changed the way that the class plays. And I don't like this class anymore. I now have to change mains if I want to keep playing this game because I don't like the way that this class plays. And those are kind of the two ends of the spectrum that Blizzard needs to balance. Again, not knowing specifically what how fundamental this change with Marksman Hunters is. I feel like if it's something where you're going to have to relearn your class a little bit, a little bit is not really phrasing that properly. If it's something where you're going to have to completely relearn how to play your class, something to the extent of like your main resource is being changed, or your entire rotation is now completely different and involves spells that didn't exist before. There can be changes that are made that will, as a like cascading effect, result in you having a different rotation just because priorities change, right? Or maybe like an ability is no longer as good, so now you take that ability out of your rotation, and as a result, other things get taken out of your rotation. Using Shaman as an example, there's been a lot of cases in the past where Elemental Blast either goes from being bad to good or good to bad, and that can have severe ramifications on the rest of the rotation. But I don't consider them changing Elemental Blast a rework of the class. I think that's just a change to a spell that has then resulted in you wanting to prioritize things a little bit differently. So it's possible that what's happening with Marksman Hunters is more in the case of, again, I don't know this, I'm just speculating. It's possible that it's more in the case of they're changing around a few abilities, and as a result, your rotation is a little bit different. It's possible that they're changing Marksmanship Hunter to the point where now you have 3 pets and you melee all the time. Like, I don't know. I doubt they're doing that, but I don't know exactly. I think the balance to strike, and I think the sort of breakpoints for that is the average player, not the hardcore player. And in fact, I would say the hardcore player's opinions on stuff like this are almost irrelevant. And that's not to say that, that's not to sound dismissive and say, you don't matter in this situation. I'm saying for perspective, for the purposes of determining, is this too much change for this point of the patch, for this point of the expansion? I think the extreme hardcore, the mythic raider, even the heroic raider, those sorts of players, whether or not they feel it's too much, well, let me put it this way. If they feel it's too much, then it's probably way too much. If they feel like it's fine, it's possible that it's still too much. To me, it more comes down to, and the people that I would look to, the opinions that I would look towards, especially back in the day when it was literally my job to gather feedback on World of Warcraft and present that to the developers. For something like this, I would almost prefer to see what the more casual audience is saying, because you can tell a lot from how they're approaching it. And if it turns into, well, I just don't understand how to play my spec anymore, I don't understand how to play my class anymore, and you're in the middle of an expansion and they feel like they have to completely relearn, and that everything they've been doing up until that point, and then all of their like spells and abilities, or not, their stat priorities and stuff changes, that can be a little bit too much. But ultimately, really, it just comes down to the semantics of the specific change that's being done. I think there's a point where it is okay and in fact good to make changes at a fairly significant level, as long as it's early enough in an expansion. I wouldn't want that to be like, I wouldn't want them to do a rework of a class immediately before a new expansion comes out, because then there's just going to be a bunch of changes to it at that point anyway. It's more along the lines, as I'm trying to pull my thoughts together into something relatively cohesive here, because I know I've been super rambly on this answer. To me, it comes down to, is this pulling the rug out from under people? If yes, maybe it's best to wait until a new expansion to pull the rug out from under them. Is it desperately needed? Like, are marksmanship hunters just in a really bad spot and they're just no fun to play, so that as a result, this needs to happen anyway? That's a factor to consider inside all of this as well. Is there some problem that has to be solved, like some scaling issue where marksmanship hunters are, everything is aim shot and that's all that matters, so you're just spamming I don't even know if aim shot still exists, but you're just spamming aim shot and nothing else is important at all, and aim shot is 70% of your damage? Like, that's a problem. That's the sort of thing that needs to be fixed. And that's the sort of thing that can then feel like a rework if they distribute your damage out onto other spells so much that now you need more of a rotation than you did before. Also, at the end of the day, it's all very subjective. It's going to be something that feels different to each individual player. So I don't know. I think it is fine for them to do major changes to a class mid-expansion. They just have to be careful with it. That's kind of the broad sense of what I can answer on that question. Again, I don't understand marksmanship hunter and the War Within well enough to be able to comment too deeply on how it's getting reworked in 11.1. That's where my head's at with it. Anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really, really do appreciate it. If you have a question that you would like to see me answer here on the show, best way to do that is to either leave a comment just right here on YouTube, or if you're a patron, head over to patreon.com/Devilor. There is a form that will be linked inside the posting for this episode. You can fill out that form because patrons do get priority on having their questions answered here on the show. So if you're a patron and you have any burning questions, head on over there. And again, please do check out my Patreon if you have not yet already. It's patreon.com/Devilor, as I have mentioned. And thank you so much to my patrons for all of the support. You guys really make sure that I can keep this thing going. And I'm going to call it there. Thanks again so much, everybody. I'll see you later.